Hi, I'm Ellen Gunlack. I'm the course coordinator and lecturer for Stat 113 Statistics and Society, and I teach the course with traditional, online, and flip sections. So we have traditional large lectures that meet twice a week in one of those large lecture halls with smaller recitations with TAs once a week. We have a flipped or hybrid class with online lectures and once a week class meetings where we do hands-on activities or group work, and we have a fully online class. And all the sections are closely coordinated with the same schedule, the same assignments, the same exams, and they're all taught by me. So here's an outline of exactly how the courses are spread out. You can see the majority of our students are in the traditional sections. We have about 400 split between two large lectures. 80 in the online and 60 in the flipped. And the lectures, everybody has access to the online lectures through Blackboard, but the traditional students get to hear those lectures in person as well, and then they have their weekly meetings with the TA. The online students do everything except for the exams online. The flip students get their lectures online like the online students do, but then they see me and a TA once a week in an active learning classroom, and there we do active learning and group work to help them practice what they learn through their online lectures. Everybody has the same online homework. Everybody does the same projects. Everybody has a statistical literacy discussion project that we do using Mixable. And then we have two other projects where if you are in a class that meets in person, like the traditional or flipped, you're going to submit those projects in person in class, and the online students submit them through Blackboard, but they're the identical projects. Everybody takes the same exams. If you are in the Lafayette area, you take the exam with us in one of those large rooms or Elliott Hall of Music. I have a few off-campus students each semester, more in the summer. And if you are an off-campus student far away from Lafayette, then you can register a proctor with me, and I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But all exams are proctored, and they are all pencil and paper exam. The traditional and flipped classes have quizzes in class. The online students don't have any quizzes because those would be hard to proctor, and if they're not proctored, then they're basically just more homework assignments. And then there is class participation given for each section. If you are in the large lecture traditional, you have iClicker questions in lecture. If you are in the online section, you check in with me through free response surveys several times a semester, and I write every student back in response to their surveys. And that lets me check in to see how the course is going for each individual. And then for the flip section, they get points, class participation points, for doing group activities during class. The flip section is probably the most unique to you, so I'll just talk you through how a typical class time meets. It's a 75-minute class. For the first 5 or 10 minutes, we review the previous quiz that they're just getting back. We talk about the most important concepts for the current week. They have already watched the lectures for that week and maybe done one of the 2 attempts on the online homework, so they've been introduced to the material. Then they spend the next 45 minutes practicing the material they've already learned. So they have their notes out, they have their books out, they might have their laptops out to pull up the lectures if they need to re-listen to something or see one of the lecture slides again. They're working on worksheets, they're working on hands-on activities, and I walk around with my TA. We walk around to help the students. There are about 60 students in the room, and they're seated at round tables with 6 students each. So we walk around, we listen to their questions, we listen to them explaining concepts to each other, and they're earning class participation points. We spend about 5 or 10 minutes answering the students' questions. If they have any last-minute questions, we wrap up the activity we were working on, and then they have a quiz based on the material for that week that they've already been practicing during that class time. So here's some pictures from my flipped or hybrid class. Here we're working on worksheets. You can see everybody's sitting at a table, a round table. They're working through problems using their notes together. I often have each group be responsible for a particular problem, and they have to put their answers on the board, and the other tables are responsible for checking their work. So you can see here they've given each other some encouraging comments if they feel another table did a good job on a hard problem. We have hands-on activities. Here's President Mitch Daniels flipping pig dice with us to understand how probability is what happens in the long run. So this is a hands-on activity to back up what they heard in lecture. So do my students choose their sections based on their learning style? Unfortunately, probably not, and maybe this is something that can change in the future. I've noticed that the online section is the first to reach capacity, so we don't usually have many freshmen in there because the older students have taken all the spots. And that's probably just because the students like the convenience of having an online class. Many students have no idea what the flipped class is before they sign up for it, but they see it meets only once a week and that sounds good to them. But it's usually listed by the registrar as a once a week class plus an independent study, which is very confusing to them. So I have to spend time explaining what the flipped class is. And the students, we did do some research, and the students in the traditional, the flipped, and the online class are similar demographically. They have similar pre-course college GPAs, but the online students are slightly older, again because the online section fills up first, and based on seniority that goes to the older students. So who might prefer the traditional section? Well, if you are a quieter or more introverted student, you might like being able to hide a little bit in a crowd. Some students really need those regular class times to be able to stay on task. They need those in-person reminders of what's going on. They need to be able to see an instructor several times a week just to stay on top of things. And since this is a large class, students who are willing to come to office hours to get help would be perfectly fine in these large lecture classes. But if they're not willing to come get help, they could get lost. So that's something to think about. It's hard to raise your hand in front of 200 other students to ask a question about something you don't understand. Who might prefer the flip question? Students who are fairly self-motivated, because you've got to keep up with the online classes and come prepared to class, because I'm not going to re-lecture anything when you get to class. Students who like having a study group. Extroverts love the flip section because they get to talk through ideas while they learn and work. And students who like learning through hands-on activities love the flip section. Who might prefer the online section? Well, again, quieter or more introverted students who like to learn in the privacy of their own home or, just on their own. Students who are good at working independently. Mature students who have complicated schedules, like the online section. Students who can stay on a schedule without constant reminders do well in the online section. If you need daily reminders, this is not the section for you. I recommend to all my online students that they set up a weekly schedule for themselves, even though I just have a deadline each week and they're free to do the work whenever they want throughout the week. They should set up for themselves. For example, every Monday will be their lecture watching day. Every Tuesday could be their homework day. Just so that they have their own routine. Students who are willing to come to office hours or to email their instructor when they are confused, they do well with the online section. But if you don't tell anybody you have a problem, we will never know that you have a problem. Students who are good at working in advance of deadlines. If you wait till the last minute to work on these assignments or these projects, then you have no opportunity to ask questions if you don't understand something. So you've got to work ahead of a deadline. Students who feel comfortable learning with technology do well in the online section. Students who can set aside enough time in their schedules to do the work. This is really important, especially during the summer. If you have a student who is doing an internship and then taking an online class or two from some other location, they are not going to be very successful with this. If a student's doing an internship, they're probably going to be consumed by that internship. Students who are taking 2 or 3 online classes and working a lot of hours at a summer job, they're going to struggle. Just because the class is online doesn't mean that it's easy or that it doesn't take any time. It takes the same amount of time or maybe even a little bit more as an in-person class. And the student needs to make sure they have the time to be successful. So I mentioned before that our online students who are far away from campus need to register a proctor with me to take their pencil and paper exam. These are some of the requirements we have for off-campus proctors. It cannot be a friend or relative. The person must have at least a 4-year college degree. The person must have a professional email address that includes the organization's name and the name or position of the proctor. So for example, a Gmail address or a Yahoo address, that won't work for me. It would need to be, like gunlack@purdue.edu, so I see the organization and the person's name, or distancelearning@purdue.edu. That tells me the location. It must be able to be verified easily by me. If I have to spend more than 5 minutes on Google to verify that this is the right address for the person and this person is qualified, then this is not a good proctor for you. And that can be a big problem with international proctors. I can't read Chinese, and if the only way I can verify your person is by reading Chinese, that's not going to work for me. That your proctor needs to speak English well, and your proctor must be willing and able to follow my directions exactly and promptly. We've had some problems with proctors in the past who don't turn things in time or don't follow my directions, and then the student ends up in academic misconduct trouble because their proctor didn't follow the directions. International proctors can be a problem for us. We've had some wonderful international proctors and we've had some problems. If a student is traveling internationally for a semester and wants to do this online class from a distance, tell them to look for a suitable proctor early and have several possibilities as options, because their first choice might not work out. This is very important. We did a research project. I worked with several people from the Center for Instructional Excellence, and we wrote a journal article comparing student attitude, statistical reasoning, performance, and perceptions for my traditional, online, and flipped sections. And this was done during the spring 2013 semester. We got it published in the Journal of Statistics Education. And these were our research questions. We want to know if there are any changes in attitudes towards statistics, and if from beginning to the end of the semester, and if those changes vary across sections. Do changes in statistical reasoning vary across the sections? Does student performance vary across sections? And do student perceptions of the course and instructor through course evaluations vary across the sections? And what we learned, that all sections showed an increase in correct statistical reasoning. I think we had a standard test that they took at the beginning of the semester and at the end. Everybody showed an increase, which was great. The attitudes towards statistics as a field were quite similar for all sections, but the traditional students were sometimes a little bit better on some of these. There were 6 different attitude components. And traditional students that semester scored higher on average on all 3 exams, but there were no significant differences between sections on homework, the project, or the university evaluations of the course or instructor. Now that was one semester, spring 2013. Now every semester since the semester we did our research project, the hybrid students have had exam scores equal or slightly above the traditional students. The online students are slightly below, but that can be misleading because every semester we have some great online students who are mature, who are independent learners, who do everything they're supposed to do. They do great. And then we have some who bring down the whole average because they just disappear on us in the semester, or they stop doing the work in between and only show up for exams, and therefore they don't do well. So don't let the exam scores for the online students, and it was maybe half a letter grade lower. It wasn't a lot lower. And again, we were looking at averages, which get brought down by others.